Right now, you are taking a live look over the Capitol building here as we cover everything related to the shutdown. And as the government shutdown approaches that 1 month mark, President Trump saying that Republican lawmakers need to initiate the quote, nuclear option. Trump writing on his Truth Social. Take a look right here at this post here. He did say, because of the fact that the Democrats have gone stone cold crazy, the choice is clear. Initiate the nuclear option, get rid of the filibuster, and make America great again. So what exactly does all of this mean? I do want to bring in Dr. Casey Burgat, an associate professor and legislative affairs program director at the George Washington University. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us today.
Anytime, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And first off, I do want to ask you here, as we go kind of back to basics, can you explain exactly what the Senate filibuster really is and how it all works?
The simplest way to think about it is that the filibuster allows the minority or any group of senators to stall legislation or Senate business from happening. Each senator has the right of unlimited debate. And if you continue to talk and talk and talk, you are preventing business from moving forward. And so with Trump comments here, he's saying get rid of that opportunity in the Senate so that they can move forward and pass the clean CR bill that has been filibustered by Democrats for a couple weeks now.
And on that same note, and you kind of touched on this already, but how would ending the filibuster really change how laws are passed there in the Senate specifically?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest misnomers about the United States Senate. People know the filibuster exists, but what it actually prevents is getting to the vote on any piece of legislation. It takes 60 votes, we're often told, to pass things in a Senate. That's not true. It takes a simple majority to pass a law or a piece of legislation in the Senate, the same way it does in the House of Representatives. What the filibuster prevents you from doing is getting to that actual vote by taking advantage of those debate opportunities. So moving on to that vote is what stops this from happening, which is, again, what Democrats have been doing for a while now.
What would it actually require to end the filibuster once and for all? And is that really a reality?
This is where people are going to hate Congress if they don't already. So to get rid of the filibuster, to invoke the nuclear option, which we saw on lower level judges and then we saw with Supreme Court level judges, what's remaining now is the legislative filibuster. And to change that, to invoke the nuclear option as Trump is advocating for, you actually have to reinterpret the precedent within the Senate. So the rule doesn't change, but what you're saying as senators that have to go there and say, what has happened in the past is that we've always been able to cut off debate with 6 or with 50 votes, a simple majority. That's obviously not been the case, as is written in the rules. It still takes 3/5 of senators duly chosen and sworn. They have to reinterpret that by basically saying that what has happened over the last 100 years didn't happen that way. It's a fake Alice in Wonderland reinterpretation.
When you take a look at all of this here as it is unfolding, what sort of maybe legislation would Republican lawmakers be able to pass here and get through the Congress in general, but specifically in the Senate, if the filibuster were gone?
Yeah, this is kind of the question of what comes next. And we've seen presidents of both parties let's say, just become increasingly frustrated with the filibuster because it's stopping them from pursuing their agenda. So Obama was frustrated with this. Biden was a little more reluctant because he was a long-term senator who enjoyed the filibuster, and now Trump has been calling for this in both of his administrations. And so you look and say, what bills are they not passing? Right now, there's a small list because they tucked so much in that One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Maybe they could go farther. So maybe some particular tax cuts. And then you start talking about, all right, what do Republicans really want to hammer home as the law of the land? I think maybe potentially a repeal and replace Obamacare, but we don't know what the details of that would be. And then maybe a national abortion ban that would take it away from the states and make it illegal across the board, even in Democratic run states.
You have to imagine that right now, Democratic lawmakers are against this, considering they are the minority in both the Senate and the House. They don't have the presidency. But how have Republican lawmakers been responding to this idea? Again, President Trump just putting this out last night officially on his Truth Social, calling for it. But are we hearing from Republican lawmakers, and what are they saying about it?
So what they say publicly versus what they will say privately are often two different things. Again, another reason people hate politics. But Senators enjoy the filibuster, even those in the majority. You would think that they would hate it because it prevents them from actually moving on their agenda. So you're right to say that Democrats right now love it because it's stopping Republicans and Trump from getting what they want. But there's also a ton of protection within the filibuster where you can say we would have done, but if for out the filibuster. But then that actually, if you remove it, you would actually have to pass those things that you say that you want, and then you own them. And these things often come with unintended consequences. And there's a lot of things that Republican senators say they would vote for if not for the filibuster, but actually it protects them from actually having to take those votes. And then even more uncertainly, owning those consequences that come when you actually do pass legislation.
What about voters? When you talk about how they would view ending the filibuster, would the average voter know? Would they care? And then on that same note, could this have any sort of impact if the filibuster was gone on maybe the 2026 elections?
So it would have impact because then there would be an expectation if you remove this very clear obstacle from passing a partisan agenda and you still fail to do it, which Republicans would struggle to pass a lot of these things they pretend they're united about, then you have to face the voters for like, all right, what's your excuse now? You just promised if you get the majorities and you no longer have the filibuster, why aren't you passing everything you did promise us? But to go to the question about likelihood, it's really unlikely right now because of these very, very entrenched incentive structures for both parties. Obviously, the minority wants it, and the majority, a certain number of their majority members, still like it because it does prevent them from actually having to own that legislation when that obstacle is actually removed.
When we look into the future here, my last question for you, do you think the filibuster there in the Senate does survive the next decade? Will that still be in place? Is there any way to know?
Yeah, there is no way to know. And the more you start to normalize this type of talk, the more it just becomes like a voting talking point answer of like, all right, why are we still doing this? And when you get more and more presidents and more presidential candidates running on this platform of throwing it out, it gives some cover to senators. It puts them in a position to defend what is oftentimes the indefensible. And so I think a lot of smart folks and a lot of senators, if they'll tell you off the record, like it's probably not long for the Senate. There may be some reforms. So there's a lot of room in between keeping it as exactly as it is now and throwing it out entirely. There's a lot of things you can do. And plus, the Senate has done this in the past. Right now, we know the filibuster threshold to be 60 votes. It used to be 66. They lowered it because of some politics involved. So there's an option there to maybe lower it to 50, 53, 52. There's a lot of room in between. So maybe reform is the talk of the town instead of just throwing it outright.
All right. Dr. Casey Burgat, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and helping to break it down. Anything else you want to add? Anything we missed here before I let you go?
No, just that again to reemphasize that filibuster prevents you from having the actual vote. The vote is the thing that still takes a simple majority. So when senators tell you it takes 60 votes, just know that there's a difference that has a distinction that actually matters there.
And we appreciate you pointing that out. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, as always. We definitely appreciate it.
Anytime, Josh.
And we are getting reaction from different lawmakers. As I mentioned here, we do have Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia saying, "Thank you, President Trump. This is what I called for from the very beginning. Since Democrats refuse to fund the government, Senate Republicans need to use the nuclear option and override the filibuster. Enough of the drama. Stop forcing people to suffer and lead the country."